Well, Cuba's an interesting case. Cuba is, not doing very well right now. That system has not been a very good one for Cuba. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation. And we want to help the people. It's very similar in the sense that we want to help the people in Cuba, but we want to also help the people that were forced out of Cuba and living in this country. Do you want to say something about that, Marco, please?
Well, I mean, I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. So suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. I mean, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems that Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba. They tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Are you cutting off the oil flow to Cuba from Venezuela?
Well, the president already announced a week ago that anything that's sanctioned, it's sanctioned oil, it's not going to be allowed to get there. So that's an
that Havana should be concerned about the Maduro operation, is fueling speculation that this administration will turn its sights to Cuba next. Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to, that doesn't mean that we're going to make it change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States if Cuba was no longer governed by an autocratic regime.
In an executive order signed Thursday, Trump branded Cuba an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. The language is sweeping and uncompromising, declaring zero tolerance for what the order describes as the depredations of the communist Cuban regime. The document states that the policies, practices, and actions of the government of Cuba directly threaten U.S. safety, national security, and foreign policy interests. It is a framing that elevates Havana from long-standing adversary to active security threat. Crucially, the order establishes a mechanism for imposing severe additional tariffs on imports from any nation found directly or indirectly selling or providing oil to Cuba. The move extends American pressure well beyond Havana, placing energy exporters and intermediaries directly in Washington's crosshairs. Broad authority is now granted to the U.S. Secretaries of State and Commerce, empowering them to identify alleged violators and recommend tariff levels directly to the president. Analysts say this effectively formalizes an energy blockade that has been tightening for weeks. That blockade intensified sharply after the Venezuelan operation cut off Cuba's primary crude supply. Subsequent pressure on Mexico, Havana's last remaining oil supplier, has pushed the island into an increasingly desperate position.
Cuba and all of this, you have stated that Pemex makes decisions autonomously and sovereignly. Can you confirm then that there were no political considerations whatsoever in this suspension of oil shipments from Pemex to Cuba?
Pemex makes decisions concerning the contractual relationship it currently has with Cuba, in accordance with the decisions that are being taken.
And why is it taken now and not before?
Well, just as for a period it was not sent, and then it was, and for another period it was not sent, and then it was.
Cuba thus has been subjected to an economic blockade for an excessively long period of time, and this ongoing situation, unfortunately, has generated significant problems of scarcity and shortages across the entire island.
President Trump has been explicit about the intended outcome. Speaking earlier this week, he predicted that the Cuban government would be failing pretty soon, boasting that the cutoff of Venezuelan oil and revenue had pushed Havana to the brink. According to data from energy tracking firm Kepler, Cuba now has just 15 to 20 days of oil reserves remaining. The figures underscore the scale of the crisis unfolding on the island. Daily blackouts are already gripping Cuban cities and towns, disrupting basic services and economic activity. Analysts warn that without rapid resupply, the country faces the prospect of economic collapse and a deepening humanitarian crisis. The White House has sought to justify the emergency declaration through a national security lens. In a fact sheet, officials accused Cuba of hosting what they described as Russia's largest overseas signals intelligence facility. The administration also alleged that Havana provides a safe environment for terrorist groups and continues to spread communist influence throughout the Western Hemisphere. These claims form the backbone of Washington's argument for extraordinary measures. Cuba's leadership has responded with defiance rather than concession. President Miguel Díaz-Canel has publicly rejected the pressure campaign, insisting that the harshness of the moment will not break the country's resolve. In a statement earlier this week, Díaz-Canel said the brutality of the threats against Cuba would not hold the nation back. His words echoed decades of resistance rhetoric shaped by a long and bitter history with Washington. That history stretches back to the 1960s when the United States imposed a sweeping trade embargo on Cuba that remains in place today. Yet even amid that hostility, the current moment stands apart. Cuba has not faced the prospect of an American naval blockade since 1962, when President John F. Kennedy placed the island under quarantine during the Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, the world stood on the brink of nuclear confrontation. Now, more than 60 years later, the language of emergency, blockade, and existential threat has returned to U.S.-Cuba relations.
I don't know, the word choke off is awfully tough. Cuba is a failing nation, and you have to feel badly for Cuba. They've treated people very badly. We have a lot of Cuban Americans who really were treated very badly, and they'd probably like to go back. And no, I'm not trying to, but it looks like it's something that's just not going to be able to survive. I think Cuba will not be able to survive.
This is a dramatic escalation that is already reverberating across the Caribbean and beyond. U.S. President Donald Trump has declared a national emergency targeting Cuba, signaling the most aggressive American action against Havana in decades. The declaration threatens steep new tariffs against any country supplying oil to Cuba, sharply intensifying pressure on an island already facing crippling energy shortages. This move comes just weeks after a U.S. military operation in Venezuela severed Cuba from its most critical source of crude oil. That operation resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, triggering a regional shockwave and leaving Havana suddenly exposed. Now, Washington's attention has shifted decisively toward Cuba. Trump has openly claimed the Cuban government is ready to fall next, a statement that has heightened fears of a widening confrontation.
The message for Cuba and Díaz-Canel